it again and entertain, well, maybe I can just do that. You know, it's not like one way is better than any other either. So here's an interesting impulse, I can follow it.
Right.
And from my experience, that's the joyful part of it, is that it's like when I start to do that, it brings into my awareness this larger part of me that's connected in some way to all these other things that are going on. So like, where did that information come from, that idea that you could have perceived that ahead of time, you know?
Yeah, boy, I really paid attention after that, and I mean, it was so right on, because afterwards I kept thinking, where did that realization come from? Because the more I went back and revisited it, it was so strong about which direction I was going to go, and it was not the usual way that I went.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me, and that just, you know, exploring the qualities of consciousness, that's one of the reasons I like doing this kind of practice, is I'm fascinated about how the mind works and how consciousness works and how we're interconnected and entangled with each other. And the intuitive practice is one way to kind of really bring that more consciously into your life.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you recommend a balance, because I've been around sometimes myself or other people when there just is an insistence on something I want to do, and it doesn't make sense, but, well, it's my intuition or whatever. And, you know, that's not necessarily what intuition is.
Yeah, and you can get locked into an idea even if it seems to come from somewhere else. So keeping an openness really is a helpful thing, I think.
And I think right along these lines, I love in the book how some of the more important things are in bold in their larger print. I think you could just go through and just read these things and get so much from it. But on page 140, the more familiar you become with your own process, the less you need external feedback. Then you can trust your own sense of rightness in the moment. So I think isn't that what we're
learning to do? And so what it talks about in the book is an idea called feedback, where in a practicing sense, you can set up little exercises. Like with the car, you might just make a note, what's the feeling about this car, and then just file it and go on with your life. And when you get feedback about it, you pay attention to it. Go, oh, that's a learning. Yeah. And then at some point, as you've done that, you do start to gain more trust, that you don't have to necessarily have that feedback before you make that decision. But again, like you said, it is somewhat balanced with the other parts of your knowing and your intelligence. But there's more of a deeper level of trust that comes in.
Yeah. I wanted to give people a sense of what's in the book, because there's a lot in here, but you have some specific exercises or recommendations. I'll just pick one. Expanding visualization. So you include visualization exercises?
Yep.
What would that look like?
Well, for one example is if you pick some kind of object you have in your house, like there's a houseplant that sits on my kitchen table, I can bring it to mind right now. And if you think about it and image it and remember it and envision it, it kind of helps that inner sensing quality, so you can start to allow that a little more clearly. And that the next step to that in an intuitive sense is to have someone else set an object on the table when you're not home. So you don't know what it is, and then you can do the same exercise. You just take it a little farther to exploring an unknown, and again allowing senses, shape, color, smell, all of that visualization practice with the senses will help open up that sensory awareness part of your perception.
It's almost like developing a muscle, like
very much
exercising.
So. Yeah, very much so.
And then I noticed some, and I'm really interested in reading it, about spatial perception, because I notice a lot with myself that if somehow I have to concentrate almost to get sort of a spatial sense of what's going on, which then makes a difference.
Yeah, and so that's another way of envisioning a space or going out in your awareness to try to perceive something, if you have a physical or tactile sense. Also, for me, when I mention the spatial in the book, it's kind of like a connective sense for me to a larger part of myself, where I feel a little more expanded. And one of the things the book talks about is that we all have different strengths and weaknesses, if you want to call them that, senses that come easily to us. Some people are more visual, some people are more tactile, some people can just access things in their dreams, for some people it's a gut feeling. And as you practice, you can pay attention first and notice what comes easy and enjoy it and use it, and then start to cultivate those other areas if you want to round it out a little bit more. Other senses you can focus on. And one way, so say if you're not a tactile person, you're sitting here in a TV interview and just noticing what you're feeling, noticing the sensations that you're having. If you pay attention to your physical senses, it will open up that door in an intuitive sense as well. So if I go back to the example of somebody put something on the table, if I can imagine reaching out my hand and touching it, I may actually get a sense, oh, there's a texture that just pops into my awareness. Interesting, I'll write it down. Pay attention to it.
And I noticed the breath, too. You have recommendations of how to work with the breath?
Yep, working with the breath is a great way, kind of coming out of some of my hypnosis work, that there are relaxation techniques, and working with trance a little bit that can also open up your access to intuition.
Interesting.
And there are many other exercises. There's like 52 different exercises in the book. So.
Okay. And so is there a general process that you recommend? Where to begin? Is there a place to start?
At the beginning of the book. Basically starting with what we've been talking, what's alive in you right now. You always start there. And once you check in with what's alive in you now, that just helps you starting to be more present, so it gets you out of your head a little bit.
Yeah, I was starting to think it sounds a lot like being in the moment.
Very much so. And in terms of an intuitive flow, as soon as we leave the moment, we get into our thoughts and thinkings. It tends to be less accurate. So I may have a sit down and have an agitated feeling in a car, and then I may think about a fight I had with a friend of mine or a girlfriend or something, and suddenly I'm way off on some other tangent, and I'm not even perceiving anymore. So some of that's part of the process that I talk about, how to sort that out a little bit.
Another favorite saying that I found in here is, if you spontaneously touch your heart with your hand, when you remember that person, that touch becomes an anchor. Give us a little more about that.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Touching an anchor. So the big theme in this book is there's a connection between the mind and the body. When I think of a person that's dear to me, I may feel a warmth in my heart. And the conscious recognition of that and the touching of my hand, it kind of connects that to my body. My mind and body and heart are kind of together. So that it becomes an anchor in the sense that when I touch it again, it tends to evoke that feeling. And it tends to evoke that kind of connection. So it's a really powerful tool that's used in hypnosis to help people connect with emotions or states of mind that make them feel safe or comfortable or empowered. A lot of different ways of using it.
And since we are the Woo Crew, I thought we might spend just a minute. We're running out of time, but to talk about the more woo aspects of this.
Yeah.
Because we have intuition from our body, but do you think we're also picking up from...
Totally. So it's back to the senses, and what comes through our body, my sense of it is it taps us into the larger collective unconscious or larger world realities. Whatever's out there can come through into our sensing. From my experience working as a remote viewer and working on different intuitive sites with archaeological work, there's no limitation to what we can perceive. We can perceive things at a submolecular level. We can perceive things on the other side of the planet, things in the past, things in the future. And that's very woo-woo, I think, because it's like there's no limitation, and we can access anything conceivable. Anything you can imagine, you can perceive.
One of my favorite paradoxes is how, in my experience, access to everything that's non-material comes through the material.
Yeah.
Or at least it's one way.
So I think some of it is being in a body. We're in this consciousness of a body. That's kind of the sensory modality that we're using, or the information modality that we're using as conscious beings. So our bodies are intimately connected with our consciousness. That may shift when we're out of a body. If you believe in out-of-body experiences, you may still be sensing and perceiving, and you may be imagining it in an astral body or a different kind of subtle body, and I think that goes into other kind of dimensions. For now, we're in these bodies, and the bodies are wonderful communicators for our consciousness.
Absolutely. It's a shame to miss the body while you're here.
Definitely.
Well, thanks, Patrick, and I wish you well with the book, and I'm looking forward to reading it. And thanks, Sarah, for being here to join in the conversation.
Enjoyed it.